I want to start by saying I've never told this story to anyone in full, not to my lawyer, not to the chaplain here, not to the one cousin who still takes my calls. I've told pieces of it, sure. You have to when people ask why you're where you are. But the whole thing start to finish, I've kept locked up because I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. And honestly, for a long time, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But something happened last month that made me realize I need to get this out. Evelyn Hart's case got quietly closed. Ruled a suicide, final determination, no further investigation. I saw it on a legal aid bulletin they pass around in here. One paragraph like she was nothing, like everything she tried to do meant nothing. So here it is, everything. My name is Caleb Morris, I'm 38 years old. I grew up in Garland, Texas, just outside Dallas, in one of those neighborhoods where every house looks exactly the same and the biggest event of the year is the 4th of July block party. My dad worked at a parts warehouse. My mom cleaned houses, nothing dramatic about any of it. We weren't rich, but we weren't desperate either. There was food, there was love. There was my younger brother Noah, who drove me absolutely insane and who I would have died for. I want you to hold on to that. I ended up opening a garage when I was 27. Caleb's Auto, original name, I know. I had a knack for engines from the time I was a teenager, learned mostly from YouTube videos and busting my knuckles on my dad's pickup. I borrowed money from my uncle, found a cheap commercial space in South Dallas and started hustling. For the first 3 years, things were actually okay. Not great, but okay. I built up a small customer base, hired one part-time mechanic named Darnell who was smarter than me about transmissions and funnier than me about everything else. Then the neighborhood started changing in ways that weren't good for business. New road construction rerouted traffic. A big box auto place opened 6 blocks away. Darnell left for a better paying job. I tried to adapt. I took on more jobs than I could handle, started cutting corners on parts cost just to stay competitive, took out a second small business loan, then a third. I was always 6 weeks away from catching up, just 6 weeks. And then 6 weeks later, I was still 6 weeks away. By the time I was 33, I owed more money than I would ever realistically make from that garage. The bank was calling. I had a credit card that was basically at the ceiling. My landlord was patient. He was a decent guy, Marcus, older man. I'd done work on his Buick for years, but even patient people have limits. I want to be honest about my state of mind during this period because I think it matters. I wasn't sleeping right. I was eating garbage, mostly from the gas station across the street. I was drinking more than I should have been, not falling down drunk, but that steady, quiet kind of drinking where you're always at a low level of numb and you tell yourself it's just to take the edge off. I was embarrassed, I was scared, and I was exhausted in a way that went deeper than just being tired. I felt like I had built something with my hands and watched it slowly fall apart, and I didn't know who to blame except myself. That combination, debt, shame, exhaustion, the desperate math of a drowning person, that's what made me capable of what came next. I had taken out a fire insurance policy 18 months earlier. It seemed sensible at the time. The garage was in a rough area. Equipment was expensive. My financial advisor, a guy from church who did taxes and basic planning on the side, actually suggested it. Up the coverage significantly because the cost of replacing the lifts and diagnostic equipment alone would have been brutal. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know what I was considering. I knew. I sat with it for weeks before I did anything. I'd be lying under some car in the pit, and my brain would just run the numbers without me asking it to. The policy was worth $750,000. My debts were around $300,000 total. That's almost $500,000 left over, a restart, a breath. I told myself it was the insurance company's money. I told myself they made billions and they'd barely notice. I told myself no one was getting hurt. I told myself all the things people tell themselves when they're about to do something they know is wrong. The plan I landed on was, and I look back at this now, and it's almost hard to believe how naive it was, I was going to leave the back door unlocked overnight. There had been 2 break-ins in that block that year. I figured someone would get in, mess around, maybe knock something over, start a fire by accident, plausible deniability. I wouldn't be anywhere near the building. I moved the cars I actually cared about, the ones customers had left for longer jobs, to a parking lot a few blocks away. Told Darnell's cousin who sometimes helped out that I was worried about theft and wanted them off-site. I told myself that was me being responsible, protecting the customers. I did it exactly 48 hours before I left the door unlocked. That's the number that came back to haunt me, 48 hours. The first time I saw Evelyn Hart was maybe 2 weeks before the fire. She walked into the garage on a Tuesday afternoon wearing slacks and a blazer that was slightly too warm for the weather, and she had this expression on her face that I can only describe as already knowing something. Like she'd walked in having already made up her mind about something and the visit was just a formality. She introduced herself and showed her credentials. Insurance investigator with the firm that held my policy. Mr. Morris, she said, your policy includes unusually high fire coverage for a shop this size. I gave her the line I'd prepared. Business is risky, equipment's expensive to replace. She looked at me for a moment. Not in a hostile way exactly, more like she was reading something just behind my eyes. Some people, she said, and her voice dropped just slightly, start counting the money before the fire starts. I laughed. I actually laughed because I didn't know what else to do and because some part of me needed to project absolute calm. I guess that's a risk in your line of work, I said. Seeing fraud everywhere, she smiled, but it didn't reach anything. Routine visit, she said. We do these on all high-value policies in the area. Have a good afternoon, Mr. Morris. She was at the door when she turned back. Lock your equipment in at night. Areas had some trouble. I stood there after she left feeling like someone had walked over my grave. The fire happened at 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday. I was at home. I had an alibi that was almost too good. I'd gone to a bar with my buddy Marcus, who was completely unaware of any of it, stayed until almost midnight, went home, ordered food on my phone with a timestamp delivery confirmation, went to bed. I was building the paper trail of an innocent man. When Marcus called me at 2:40 a.m. to tell me the garage was on fire, he lived nearby and had seen the light. I drove over and did what I had planned. I stood on the sidewalk in the rain. I put my hands in my hair. I let my face do the work of looking devastated. The entire building was gone by morning. I filed the claim the next day. And then Evelyn came back. She came back 2 days later, same blazer, same expression. But this time she had a folder. She sat across from me at my kitchen table. I don't even remember inviting her in, and she opened the folder without any preamble. Without any warmth. The vehicles registered to your shop for active service jobs, she said. All of them were moved to an external lot 48 hours before the fire. My mouth felt dry, but I didn't speak. The CCTV system on the building, she said, moving to the next page, experienced a malfunction the evening of the fire. The system log shows it was manually reset at 11:48 p.m. and then went offline. I didn't know how to, Mr. Morris. She looked up from the folder. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm not law enforcement. I'm telling you this as a person who has done this job for 11 years. She closed the folder. Whatever you're doing, stop. Don't file this claim. Walk away from it. Figure out another way. You don't know what you're talking about, I said. My voice was steadier than it had any right to be. She looked at me for another long moment, and then she gathered her folder and stood up. I told you before, she said. Don't try this. She left. I sat at my table for 20 minutes not moving. And then, because I am a person who is capable of enormous stupidity when I'm cornered and scared and in denial, I decided that she was bluffing, that she had nothing concrete, that it would be fine. 3 days later, I checked my bank account. $200,000 deposited overnight. No name, no reference, no explanation. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the bank for about 45 minutes trying to convince myself there was a normal reason for it. In advance on the claim, processed wrong, some accounting error, anything. Then my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. 4 words. The fire was beautiful. I drove home. I locked my door. I sat on my couch and I tried to remember how to breathe. I didn't sleep that night. I kept coming back to the same thought, turning it over and over. I didn't hire anyone. That was the whole point of my plan. There was no one to trace it back to. I left a door unlocked. That's it. That was all I did. Someone else had done the rest, and they knew it was me who had opened the door. Evelyn called me at 7:30 the next morning. She sounded different than she had in my kitchen, less measured, almost agitated. Who are you working with? She said before I could even say hello. I don't know what, Caleb. She never called me by my first name before. The accelerant pattern from your fire, it matches 2 fires from last year, one in Midland, one in Fort Worth. The investigators on those cases flagged a specific signature, the way the fire was started, the specific origin point, it's the same. What does that mean? Even as I asked it, I already knew I didn't want the answer. It means someone professional started your fire, someone who's done this before. A pause. The people who filed claims on those other 2 fires are dead, Caleb, both of them. 1 car accident, 1 rule to fall. Both within 6 months of their fires. My hand was shaking holding the phone. I pressed it against my palm to steady it, but it didn't help. I didn't hire anyone, I said. I swear to you I didn't hire anyone. She was quiet for a moment. Then you need to understand that you are in something much bigger than insurance fraud and you need to talk to me. We met that afternoon at a diner off of Minus 35. She was already in a booth in the back when I got there. She had coffee, but she hadn't touched it. She told me what she'd pieced together over 2 years of investigating similar cases. There was an organized network. She was careful about how much she said. Told me she was still building the picture that specifically targeted small business owners in financial crisis. People who were desperate but not criminal, not connected. They'd find someone like me through financial records, lien filings, court documents, public information. They'd let the person do the groundwork, take out the insurance, establish a reason for the policy, and then they'd execute the fire themselves, using the business owner's apparent motive to cover their own tracks. The business owner files the claim. The network takes a cut through back channels, and if anyone talks or if the investigator gets too close, accidents, I said. Always accidents, she said. I thought about the $200,000 in my account. I thought about what that text message meant. They had already sent their payment, which meant they already owned me. Which meant if I walked away from the claim, if I went to the police, if I cooperated with Evelyn, I looked at her across the table. Why are you telling me this? You're an insurance investigator. Your job is to prove I committed fraud. My job, she said carefully, is to protect my company's interests, and right now the bigger threat to my company isn't one fraudulent claim. It's a network that's been stealing from dozens of policies across 3 states. She picked up her coffee. Also, she said quieter, I don't want to see you end up like the other 2. I drove home in a fog. I kept checking my mirrors. I didn't know what I was looking for, a black car, someone following me, something. I just felt exposed in a way I never had before. There was a black SUV parked across the street from my house when I got home. It was just sitting there, engine off. Windows tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside clearly, but I could tell someone was in the driver's seat. I sat in my driveway for a minute looking at it. Then I went inside and watched it from the window until it was dark, at which point it was still there, and then I went to bed with all the lights on and barely slept. In the morning it was gone. I told myself I was paranoid. People park on streets, it didn't mean anything. 3 days later, my brother Noah's car went under the back of a semi on a Minus 20. The police came to my door that afternoon. I remember the sound of the knock. I remember thinking before I opened the door that it was probably Evelyn again. I remember the officer's face when I opened it, that particular expression that isn't quite neutral, isn't quite sad, that is just careful. The face of someone about to change your life. Noah was 31. He had a girlfriend named Priya who had met twice, and who seemed to make him genuinely happy in a way he hadn't always been. He had a decent job at an engineering firm. He called me every Sunday evening without fail, and we would talk for anywhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours about nothing and everything. He was the only person in my life who I felt like actually knew me. They told me he only survived 8 minutes after the impact. I sat down on the front step. I don't remember deciding to sit, I was just on the ground. Days later, it's all blurred, I found out that the police investigation flagged something. The brake line on Noah's car had been cut. Deliberately and precisely. The report said it was consistent with someone who knew what they were doing. And then Evelyn came to me again and she showed me something on her phone. Surveillance footage from a gas station 2 blocks from Noah's apartment, the night before his death. A black SUV parked across from his building, same make. Same model, same partial plate as the one I'd seen in front of my house. I told her everything. Sitting in her car in the parking lot of a Kroger, I told her everything from the beginning. My debts, the plan, the unlocked door. The $200,000, the text message. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat quietly for a moment. You didn't hire a professional arsonist, she said. No, but they used your building anyway. And they've been watching you this whole time. She stared out the windshield. Your brother, they wanted you to know it was them. That's why the brake line. That's why they didn't try to make it look natural. Why? Because you didn't cooperate fast enough. The $200,000 was a message. You were supposed to stay quiet, let the claim go through, let them take their cut and move on. When you started talking to me, she stopped. They killed my brother because I talked to you. She didn't answer that directly. She just said, you need to cooperate with the FBI. I've been in contact with an agent working financial crime. This case is bigger than just your fire, Caleb. There are over a dozen incidents across Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico that fit the pattern. Your cooperation could be the thing that breaks this open. I thought about Noah. His Sunday phone calls, his girlfriend Priya. Okay, I said, whatever you need. The FBI came to my house 2 days later. 2 agents, a woman named Reyes and a man whose name I keep forgetting, some kind of 3-syllable name that my brain never held onto. They were professional and not unkind, and they told me I was facing serious federal charges for insurance fraud, arson-related, and that my cooperation was being considered favorably. Then they told me they needed to show me something. They had a laptop. Agent Reyes turned it around and hit play on a video. The footage was from inside my garage. The angle was high, like from one of the overhead lights or the ceiling joists. It showed the interior clearly, and it showed a man walking through the space with a gas can, methodically coating the floor along the walls. The man's face was clearly visible. It was my face. I heard myself say, that's not me. My voice was completely flat. I think I was beyond shock at that point, some kind of circuit had tripped. The metadata on this video, Agent Reyes said, places it as recorded on the night of the fire from your phone. My phone was taken from me. The words came out slowly, like I was explaining something to someone who didn't speak English well. At a bar, someone bumped into me. He took my phone for a few seconds and I thought he was just being clumsy and handed it back. Do you remember this person? The other agent asked. White guy, medium build, brown jacket. I had a couple drinks, so I wasn't paying close attention. They looked at each other in that way that people in authority look at each other when they've heard something they find unlikely. Here's the thing I kept coming back to in the days after that meeting, sitting in my house trying to figure out what was happening to me. Someone had bumped into me at that bar. I had noticed because it was jarring enough, slightly, I said something like watch it, he apologized. Maybe 2 seconds total, maybe 3. I got my phone back and I put it in my pocket and I forgot about it. In those 2 or 3 seconds, someone had planted a deepfake. Or used whatever technology they used to construct footage that looked exactly like me, moved exactly like me, stood exactly like me, and attached it to a location timestamp from my own device. They had planned this down to the specific bar I'd be at that night. They had known my schedule. They had been watching me long before I ever noticed that SUV across from my house. And they needed me convicted, because a convicted insurance fraudster can't testify credibly against anyone, and a dead man can't testify at all. They had covered both options. Evelyn came to see me at the county jail maybe 2 weeks after my arraignment. I was in bad shape by then, not sleeping, not eating much, just cycling through the same thoughts over and over, the same images. Noah's car. The SUV. My brother's face the last time I saw him, when he'd stopped by the garage 2 months before everything fell apart, and we'd eaten terrible tacos on the hood of some customer's pickup and talked for an hour about nothing. She sat down on the other side of the glass and she looked tired too, the kind of tired that's been building for a long time. The FBI is still building the case, she said. The video, there are people looking at it. There are questions about the metadata, about some inconsistencies in the light rendering. It's not over. It feels over, I said. Caleb, she waited until I looked at her. I know you think the right move would have been to never touch that insurance policy. You're right, but you are not the worst person in this story. You're not even close. She leaned forward slightly. The people who killed your brother are the worst people in this story, and I'm going to make sure that's on record somewhere, whatever happens. I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded. She stood up to leave. And then she stopped and turned back and said almost to herself more than to me, I told you, before all of this, I told you not to try it. You did, I said. She nodded once, and then she left. 3 weeks later, they found her in her car, parked outside her apartment building. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide, carbon monoxide, windows up, engine running, garage closed. Evelyn Hart, 44 years old. 11 years with the insurance company. 2 prior commendations for investigation work. No history of depression on record. Active case files still open on her desk. A half-eaten sandwich in the fridge at her apartment. I found out through a legal aid newsletter they distribute in here. 1 paragraph, no photo, no mention of the cases she was working. The night before she died, she left me a voicemail. My lawyer heard it and we flagged it for the FBI. I'm not supposed to talk about what exactly she said because it's technically evidence in an ongoing investigation. And yes, there still is an ongoing investigation, or at least there's supposed to be, though I've heard nothing in 8 months. But I will tell you this much because the relevant part isn't going to compromise anything. She said, they know I talked. That's how the message ended, just that sentence. And then silence, and then the call ended. I have thought about that voicemail every day since I heard it. The fact that she made it at all, knowing what she knew, knowing what had already happened to the other people in similar cases that took something, some decision. She could have stayed quiet and protected herself. She knew the risks better than anyone. She made the call anyway. I don't know who reads things like this. I don't know if anyone will believe any of it. I know how it looks from the outside, convicted fraudster claiming he was framed, trying to build sympathy, classic jailhouse story. I know that, but here's what I know is real. My brother Noah died because of a choice I made. Not because someone cut his brake line, though that's how he died. Because I decided that a building was worth more to me than my integrity, and in making that decision I became useful to people who have no bottom, and they used me and they punished me and they killed my brother to make sure I understood who was in charge. I think about the night before I left that door unlocked. I was sitting in the garage alone after closing, just sitting in the quiet with a beer and the radio on low, and I was telling myself all the things I told myself. That it was just money, that no one would get hurt, that the insurance company could afford it. I should have just sat there in that garage and figured out another way. There's no version of this that doesn't hurt. Even if the FBI breaks the case open, even if the video gets flagged as fabricated, even if somehow I get out of here, none of that brings Noah back. None of that gives Evelyn Hart back the 11 years she spent doing her job honestly. None of it closes the thing that opened in me that night. I decided to leave a door unlocked, but I wanted someone to know Evelyn's name. I wanted someone to know that she did her job right, and she tried to warn me, and she kept working even when she knew it was dangerous, and she died because of it, and she deserves more than one paragraph in a newsletter. I wanted someone to know that the network that killed my brother and killed Evelyn Hart and staged a video to put me here is still operating. Somewhere, targeting someone else who's drowning in debt and desperate enough to do something stupid. If you're that person reading this right now, if you're sitting somewhere with a plan that feels clean and contained and victimless, please understand that there is no such thing. Whatever door you're thinking about leaving unlocked, lock it. Find another way, borrow money from someone you trust, file for bankruptcy, sell everything you own, reach out to your family even if you're ashamed. Whatever it costs you, it is cheaper than this. That's everything I have, that's the whole story. I still hear the rain from that night sometimes when it gets quiet in here. And I hear her voice, Evelyn's voice on that last voicemail. Not even scared really, just certain, resigned to something she'd made peace with. They know I talked, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that except carry it, so that's what I'm doing, just carrying it. CM somewhere in Texas.